Dude, my butthole puckered just from cringe. That's awesome.
I'm your host Blob, and this is Blabspike. In today's episode, we're talking about running and organizing events for tabletop games. Joining us is a very special guest. It's Q of Q's Mod Shop fame. How do you do?
Hi, I'm good. I'm very excited to be here. I can't lie. I love talking about how to set up events, and I hope I can give good advice on this topic.
Yeah, I'm very excited to have you on as well because you have a rich and storied history with running events. First of all, what kind of events do you run and what sort of roles and hats do you take on during these things?
So I've run all kinds of events. I've ran grassroots locals, official local tournament scenes. I've ran pre-releases and basically every other event in between, like their special ancillary events. And I have been a tournament organizer. I've been a judge. I've been the PR guy behind all those events. I've basically worn every hat you can wear.
That's actually a lot more than I thought you would have when I called you up for this. But I thought you just like, you had a couple of events in your bag. But it's great to know that you have all these different perspectives. So what does it actually take to sort of set up and run these events?
It's a lot of paperwork. It is a disgusting amount of paperwork in reading the official rules and contacting your representatives and all that stuff. It is, unfortunately, it's a little bit more boring on like the organization end, but it a lot of paperwork. It's crazy.
So like when you say paperwork, what do you exactly mean by that? And like, are these events like sort of like official tournament events that are sort of run by like the big companies that like, these games are for?
So I typically run officially sanctioned events. So that means let's use Yu-Gi-Oh as an example. I contact my Konami rep. We register for the event through the Konami portal for stores, and then they send us our tournament kits and everything like that, and then we send event reports back to them just to make sure it's all up and up and everything like that. So it's all following their guidelines they set up for the stores.
What do you consider to be the most important things to pay attention to when you're putting together an event?
What other stores are doing, like what other successful stores are doing. I always recommend I was actually having a conversation with someone who wants to run a Digimon Locals at their store a different day from the one that we run. And they were very respectful about that.
All right.
And they asked the same question. And I said, listen, you just observe how other events are ran and then take a note and see what you can adapt into your own situation. Because, the style you run of events is going to evolve. But having the baseline of like, okay, this is how a store with like 30 plus people run it. How can I emulate that for my 6 people that are going to be showing up for my event?
Okay. In a similar vein, what do you think are superfluous things that aren't strictly necessary when you're creating events?
Honestly, like the only things you should really be focusing on are like hard things is don't step on the toes of other stores. Like don't schedule the same event on the same day because you don't want to split the player base. Maybe it's a day before or a day after type deal. But other than that, like I personally do think that almost every detail is necessary when at least organizing the event, because the better you pay attention to the small stuff, the better and more comfortable your players will be at the event.
Really, not a single thing you can think of, like.
I mean, like I used to keep a notebook.
Yeah.
Genuinely keep a notebook of everything I wanted to, like, of how other stores are running events and how I could, get my events to be the same caliber. Like we're talking like even the positioning of the tables in the event area. Like I took notes of everything. Like I think starting out or like even at the beginning stages, every detail is important.
That's very enlightening, actually. All right. So when I think of events, I mostly think of in-person situations like pre-releases or local tournaments, but I think I'd be remiss to not ask if you've had experience running events with an online component, such as the webcam duels that were very popular during a certain event in recent history.
So Actually, I used to run my own online locals during the event that shall not be named. I actually ran it for about 6 months, and then obviously, as you have seen, I've helped run a couple of online events for other indie card games. So actually, I have a fairly decent experience with online events, and honestly, it kind of depends on the day, but I almost prefer online over in person.
Oh, that's pretty interesting. What do you think are the biggest differences between in-person events and online events? You know, both as an attendee and from the perspective of an organizer.
So for an organizer for online, I don't have to wear pants. That's a pretty big plus. Being as comfortable as possible. No, but it all depends on your how you can handle being in front of people. So I know a lot of people who can handle being in front of 1,000 people in front of their desktop, but you put them in front of 10 people, face to face, they fumble, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just different strengths. I definitely think the biggest differences is that face to face component. So when I run events, I treat it more like a performance. Like I'm putting on a show. I want to make sure my players are having the best time they possibly can while also I do the judging, but also, maybe get a couple laughs in person I can definitely do that easier because like I can kind of gauge the room and everything like that. But for organizers, it's online is a bit of a trap. I definitely think that you can get too distracted too easily with online events as opposed to in person. For attendees, I would say that's actually almost the exact same thing. Is the ability to get distracted is I would say the biggest difference.
Yeah, just as a small anecdote, I know someone that was part of an online tournament and they fell asleep right before the final round and they missed it.
Yep.
Yeah,
That
stuff happens.
that's way more common than I think people even understand.
All right. A big part of having events is having participants. And I think marketing and promotion is one of the tougher things for fledgling event runners to do. What's some advice you might have based on your experience? Whether it's some mediums organizers should look at, and are there things they should be doing, and where should they be doing those things?
Utilize social media so hard. I physically do not understand the organizers and TOs and even the judges that are like allergic to like Discord, Facebook, or even Instagram. I've never understood that because these are your greatest tools for marketing, for getting your players' attention, and even having them gathered in one spot. Stores more and more now are having like a store Discord. That is the best tool you can have because it's like, oh, you can at everyone or at the specific event in the server and be like, hey, here's the update. Here it is. And you get the information out. So I definitely would say Discord is going to be your number one. Facebook's going to be your number two biggest mediums that you should look at and should 100% master.
There was like this point in 2018 to around the special event in 2020 where I was really surprised that a lot of like local stores just didn't have an online presence, which actually made it really difficult to figure out when events were happening, if they were happening at all. I even know that like 2022, which is still like fairly recent, I'd be trying to like find pre-release information and I just couldn't find any, so I just wouldn't go. So I'm hoping organizers start to utilize the power of social media or just having like an obvious presence online.
Plus, it helps your store's sales. And more sales equal more product, and more product equals the potential of more players in the door. So if you're not utilizing social media, you're literally losing money. It's ridiculous.
Of course, getting people in the door is just one thing. Keeping them in and never letting them out is another. What are some practices for retaining people's interest throughout the event? And I'm thinking food and snacks are one thing, but maybe even things like how play is structured can play into things. For example, the good old days of pairings being posted on a piece of paper creates a natural point of excitement, which is a huge highlight in like younger Blabspike's memory of local events.
So I definitely think food, snacks and drinks are important. The other thing that's really important to keep them engaged, genuinely, just talk to them. Like you start creating those like personal connections. Like I could tell you every single one of my players' names if they have a spouse or like a significant other and like what their hobbies are. Because like I mean, one, I genuinely care about all my players, you know, but also it's like when you create that connection, it makes them want to come back because they're like, oh, that's my boy Q over there, instead of, oh, that's just some schmuck slinging cardboard behind a counter.
Yeah.
Uh, I definitely think the other thing would be, it's funny you mentioned the paper pairings, because every once in a while I'll pull out, like, because everything's automatic through apps and stuff these days. Sometimes
Yeah.
I will print it on paper just to kind of change things up a bit. And even now, like, you see adults gather around that paper and like they're shouting across the room like, "Hey, your pairing is this or your pairing's that," and like it's just electric. There's not another feeling like it. It's so cool to see. You're absolutely right on that, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, it's still like the thing I remember the most about playing card games early on. I wish there's something different about like, oh, time to check your apps. Everyone looks at their app and then they immediately move to like the table, right? Maybe that's just a
Yeah,
boomer in me talking.
no, I 100% agree with you. Like it it's just so blah checking an app. Like it's really good for big events. Cuz I know Yu-Gi-Oh is shifting more towards being able to get your pairings on phones, which, wrangling 500 plus people, that's huge, right? When you got like 12 people in a room, it's like we all know each other's names and like the exact deck list you're running. Like we don't need to check an app. Like we can throw paper airplanes at each other to get pairings. Something fun.
Yeah. So most stores I know run locals fairly consistently, but there are always some fun events like pre-releases to break up the monotony. I want to get your perspective on how to balance novelty and stability when it comes to event planning throughout a period of time.
That's a great question. So it comes back to really combing through like the rules and what availability of tournaments the whatever like organization offers. Like I don't know if people know this. I know I'm using Yu-Gi-Oh as an example a lot, but Yu-Gi-Oh has like 4 different formats you could play. Digimon actually has a few different formats. Magic obviously has like 8,000 formats. But you know, it's all about communication as well. Ask your players what they want to do. Like, don't be allergic to that. Like, your players will tell you 100% how to make your local succeed always. So, I just ask them like, "Hey, we've been doing this for a while. Do you guys want to shake it up with like maybe a popper night?" If people don't know what popper is, that's where you play with commons and uncommons, and that's it. So you can't use any of your shiny cardboard. You got to use the dull, lame cardboard.
There's foil commons these days.
It's crazy. I hate it. That's not popper in my eyes.
If it's
You
not
talked about
heavily
the
played,
boomer
I don't want
before.
it.
Exactly, dude. If my cards aren't a circle, what are we doing? But absolutely, like, just ask your players because they'll tell you like, oh, we just want to practice. So like, especially like, let's say a regionals is coming up for an event. And you ask them like, oh, do you guys want to shake it up a little bit? Most of the time they'll say no. We want to kind of grind, testing out the deck list we want to do for regional to make sure we could really hone it in. And as the TO, you definitely should respect that 100%. But if it's like, let's say tournament season's over and they're like, oh, I'm kind of burned out. That's when you can be like, all right, we're gonna do a teams event. So like we'll play in teams of 2 or teams of 3, and then we'll just have like a big fun box tournament for that. So like the winning team gets a box they split amongst themselves or something like that.
I'd like to pick your brain on what it takes to run events back to back. Like, what does it take to make week 5 locals as engaging as week 1? And how do you decide on resource allocation over multiple events?
I can't lie. This is my favorite question out of every question you sent me. And I will tell you why. Because I'm gonna humble brag a little bit, which I don't normally like to do. I think this is what separates me from a lot of other TOs and judges because I can keep it interesting because it comes back to you're relating to your players. So now it's all of a sudden it's like you can be like you're keeping them engaged because you're taking an interest in like their day to day, but also like, you know, you should care in general because they're people that keep coming back week to week. Also, and maybe this sounds a little silly, genuinely come up with corny dad jokes. I'm dead serious. You would be so surprised. Like, think about it this way. what's more unifying than just saying a dad joke and the entire room groans and rolls their eyes at it? Right? That's a real moment of like, all right, this guy's got jokes. Like I'm not saying you got to practice a whole, tight 10 or anything like that, but have a couple jokes in your pocket, like be personable. That's what keeps it interesting, is that you're not it's not the event that's keeping it interesting, it's you, the TO, that's keeping it interesting. And I think that's something that people really overlook.
I see. Something brings them in, then cues dad jokes keeps them in. All right, that's what we're going with. All right. When it comes to building a community, I think repeat participants are pretty important for establishing a vibe and ensuring activity. What are some ways to incentivize people to become regulars?
Care about them as people. Genuinely show an interest in the deck they're playing, show an interest in them as people, be opening and welcoming. That's I'm beating a dead horse here with that through a lot of my questions, but it really is like you're playing a people's game. You want to be as inviting and welcoming as possible. And if you do that, you'll notice people will be like, "Oh, I feel comfortable to play here." And that's what you want. You want an open, comfortable, inviting space.
I think we've gone quite a while without addressing the air fryer in the room. How about pricing? I want to first do a little vibe check. How important is pricing to you as an individual from whatever perspective you want?
Pricing, it materialistic wise, is 100% going to be what keeps them coming back. Also, I respect the air fryer joke. That was very funny.
Thanks.
I don't know if anyone else is going to get it, but I don't care. I got it, and that's all that matters. So this is what I was talking about it with somebody where it was, they asked the question of what's more important, like something attached to the game for pricing, or like just a generic, like even like store credit. I don't know if I'm like super for, but like that's a whole other can of worms. I don't know if I want to get into right now, but physical pricing attached to the game is what will keep players coming back in, on top of you being inviting, personable, everything I said vis-a-vis last question. Konami has OTS packs, Digimon has participation and winner packs. I don't know what Magic does because I don't really play Magic anymore. Pokemon actually also has League packs, which are really cool. So they're like stamped with the Pokemon League logo. Those are really fun to give out to people. Actually, you see their face like brighten up, and it's really cool.
Now for a bit of thoughtfulness. What do you think makes for good pricing? Like, how should pricing make people feel? How does it look in its promotion? And what should the practicality of the pricing be like?
Good pricing is something that will keep them invested in the game longer. So, part of it is out of the control of the TO, because it's like, oh, the cards in this participation pack aren't the best. That's not on you, that's on them. But also, like, someone like getting cool alt arts, or like even getting like participant or winner stamped cards is huge. And people should feel good about winning it. It definitely should be something that helps propel your game forward.
Okay, so that brings up, I think, an interesting perspective. You think it's part of the responsibility of the company that makes the game to create interesting pricing to give out to tournament organizers?
I absolutely think it's the responsibility of the company, at least to provide something interesting. Like the store to a point can, like, let's say, like, for entry it could be a pack of the newest set or something like that. But companies that supply tournament kits, they should also kind of know what's going on in their game, so they can make pricing that could benefit the players that are playing competitively. Even if you show up at a locals, like, and you're playing casually, you're still playing competitively. Like, everyone's gonna sweat regardless of what level you're playing. That's why I'm not a big fan of the word, like, casual versus competitive, but that's also a completely different can of worms.
That'll be a different episode. What are some examples of your favorite prizings that you've received, and what are some examples of favorite prizes that you've given out?
Ooh, okay. I actually have a little bit of a story now. So when I used to run a lot of Pokemon events. Those are some of my favorite ones to run because first off, watching like a 10-year-old absolutely smoke a fully grown adult man in a card game will never not be funny to me. But I actually made a trophy for my first ever tournament I ran, and it
Oh,
was in Pokemon. So back when Hidden Fates came out, they did the Ultra Ball, Great Ball, like you open it and it's a deck box. So what I did is I painted it gold and I made a little trophy out of it.
that sounds
Like
so
I
fun.
went very try hard. That is my favorite prizing I've ever given out because it was so personal to me, but also because it was my first event I ever ran by myself as an official Pokemon judge.
That sounds great. Do you know where it is now?
I have no it's probably been 6 years since then.
I
But
hope you
I
find out where it is.
I still know the guy who runs the locals. Maybe I'll shoot him a message and find out. But yeah, I remember that so vividly, and like I drew the bracket on the giant whiteboard in the library that we hosted Pokemon League in. Like it's one of my most cherished memories in general because
Hmm.
it was such a spur of the moment. Like the guy running its name is Jason, and dude, shout out to him. He's the one who definitely encouraged me to like really like invest myself as a TO. And I mentioned to Jason like, yeah, I'd love to run my own tournament, and he stopped everyone is like, hey, we're gonna do a tournament right now, and Q's gonna run it, just like middle of league. And he looked at me, he's like, draw up a bracket, let's do it. So like maybe my favorite memory, one of my favorite memories, period.
Yeah,
Um,
that sounds magical.
Definitely favorite prizing I've received. It's got to be like I'm a sucker for playmats and just getting a cool even if it's not a winter playmat, like getting a playmat is so personal, you know? Cuz it's like objectively there is a finite number of these and I have one. That feels good as a player.
Yeah, like I know Yu-Gi-Oh pre-releases have like a winter playmat, and one of my friends won one way back, like I want to say like 2016, and like that was like their go-to playmat until like they upgrade to like some cloth mat
Yep.
shenanigans.
Winning your first playmat I think is a core memory for a lot of players. I mean, obviously not every player can say they've won a playmat, but the
Mm.
people who have, that's a core memory. Your first playmat win, you have to sweat so hard and battle through round after round after round, and you just take it at the end. That's a taste that I can't even describe. I used to be a gigging musician, and like I would akin that to the same feeling of like a standing ovation. Like it's that same adrenaline rush that I can't even describe to people because I hope they can experience it themselves.
One type of prizing that I hope to get myself or to be able to give to participants someday is, a giant card. Have you seen those giant cards?
Dude, so it's funny. Who was I talking to about this? Maybe I was talking to Z about this, but like I think it would be so cool, like even at like, and if like at PAX or something, like you have like a couple giant cards and like people who buy your game like they enter a raffle to like win it at a convention would be cool, but like dude, playing for a giant card, like I've always wanted to do those at so I was at YCS Niagara a couple years ago, and that was one of the events was giant card. And I regretted so hard not doing that one,
We need
but
more
a
giant card
giant
prizings.
card goes hard.
More games need to do giant cards.
I agree. Have you seen what a giant Yu-Gi-Oh card looks like? It's mint. It's
Yeah,
like, dude, it's chef's kiss.
they're so cool.
I agree. That's like, dude, if I ever get a giant card, I don't think I would ever shut up about it. Genuinely. Like,
It-
that would be, because that's really like, you're talking like maybe 15 people total have a giant card that's the same one.
yeah, we're it's definitely going into like the family heirloom pile, you know?
Absolutely.
Or it's being buried with me.
Dude, that would be crazy. You're like lowering in your casket, your family's crying, and you're always your spirit's just like, you better bury that blue eyes white dragon giant card in my grave.
I want to pivot a little bit into scale and prestige. While my understanding of event organizing is limited to small things like casual hangouts, I want to hear a little bit about what it takes to run big ticket events that bring in a bigger crowd, like pre-releases and release dates. How do those compare to tinier events that are trying to grow a grassroots community?
Ooh, this is a great question as well. I definitely think running a pre-release is a bit of a different beast because there's a different atmosphere around it. So, because you're in pre-releases, typically you're competing for like physical prizes. So it feels a bit of a heavier atmosphere because like people are sweating hard. Not, I mean, probably physically too, but like they're trying to win. But like my heart will always belong to grassroots events because there's definitely something special about starting your own community. And then seeing it evolve to the point where you can do pre-releases. That's a sweet that might be the sweetest feeling ever. Cause like with grassroots, you're trying to like it's like akin to like you seeing like someone on a college campus like trying to start up their club and they're handing out flyers and stuff. Whereas with pre-releases, it's like that's when you're pushing like details on Facebook of like, all right, this is then here's the number of allocation we got, here's the pricing, and here's how much it is to get in. We have this cap of people. We might do a couple days of pre-release type deal. Because there have definitely been times where like I ran 4 releases back to back to back to back.
That sounds like a lot, man.
It is like 4 pre-releases in 3 days is disgusting. It
Yeah,
is. You want to talk about like I don't want to say soul crushing because none of this is soul crushing. I love running events. This might be one of my favorite things to do, period. But there's definitely a point of like, all right, I kind of hate humanity a little bit because people are kind of entitled, but you know,
yeah, like from a player perspective, it's like I'm used to locals are anywhere between like 10 to 20 players at a time. And I know that whenever I go to pre-releases, it's like 30 people. And of course, there's always like newer players as well, also mixed in with like the sweatiest sweats I've ever seen. Like, like
Yep.
I've had like the easiest games of my life and the hardest games of my life, and like,
Yep.
my shitty, terrible seal pool.
Yep.
Yeah,
Dude,
yeah.
that's the pre-release experience, baby. You're gonna play your worst and your best games. There's never an in between.
All right. With all of that in mind, what are your favorite kind of events to run? Well, I guess you
It's
kind of
the
answered this.
the weird events
Yeah.
is what I'll say. I know that that's a giant blanket statement, but dude, the weird events are some of the most fun to run. I don't know if you've ever played in it in like a 3v3 tournament before, but there's a whole set of rules of like how players sit. So they're assigned A, B, and C. A and B can talk to each other, and B and C can talk to each other, but A and C cannot talk to each other. So like you can communicate and just be like, oh, they might have this. Like you're talking to your team about the games you're playing because the goal is to win 2 out of the 3 games that are being played at the same time. It's crazy. And that's also the event where I've definitely given out, I want to say about $2,000 worth of prizing at a big 3v3 event. And it was, dude, we gave away cases of stuff. It was incredible. I think we had 36 people, and that event took us 7 hours. Like it was an all-day affair. Because I think we did 5 rounds and then top 4 or top 8. I don't remember exactly because this was a couple years ago now. But I remember that event pretty vividly. Like we gave away play mats, we gave away like just random like extra OTS packs. Dude, it was incredible. I would love to run more 3v3 events, but like the weird stuff, like I would love to run a Pauper League. That would be dope as hell.
Similarly, like what are the games that you like to run events for?
Ooh. there's definitely not a game that I dislike running. My favorite, I'm kind of biased to Yu-Gi-Oh. You know, it's what I have now the most time in. Pokemon's a close second, and then Digimon's a close third. Um, I also used to run One Piece events personally. I was the reason actually One Piece is even a thing in our area.
Oh,
That took a lot of work to get One Piece introduced in. But now, like, there's other store like the store I'm at currently and all the other stores in the area, they're getting like 20, 25 people per like a week just to play locals. And it feels good to say like I was one of the guys that was able to start One Piece in this area. And that feels good.
any reason you're not running them anymore?
I'm just not at that store anymore,
Oh,
so my responsibilities have shifted a little bit. So I'm at a new store now, and there's a guy that works nights that takes care of a lot of the events. So actually, it's been a huge weight off my shoulders because now I can, in my spare time, actually run events for more indie games,
I
which
see.
is I absolutely love running events for indie games because then you can do like you know when I did the event for Mutology, I was able to shoutcast that entire tournament with 2 lanes. Dude, that was a hoot and a holler. Like it was so fun. Like I made a stream overlay, backdrops, like 2 lanes and I had like jokes written out and stuff. Dude, it was awesome.
That sounds pretty great. Are there any other indie events that you ran that you want to shout out?
Uh the Boundless tournament was really fun as well. That was a great I love both of those games quite a bit. Boundless was fun. I actually would love to. I'm always down to like work with people and teach them how to run events better. I would love to do more indie events. Like I want to listen. I want to rack up names. I want to get my resume as big as possible.
Yeah, yeah. Send in your games to Q from Q's Mod Shop, and also a couple Dowie dollars, fee for service, All
Listen, I'm
right.
very affordable.
All he asks for is a corn dog, maybe two.
Today I will have 2 corn dogs.
To end things off, let's imagine a hypothetical scenario where you get a reasonably huge amount of resources and are organizing an event. Let's handwave the strenuous amount of work required, but what kind of massive event would you be proud of running successfully? It doesn't even have to be game related. Like maybe it's a rave or a concert, an expo, or maybe bringing life back to like a Burning Man type event.
So when you sent me this list, this was the one I spent the most time really thinking about, and it wouldn't be gaming related. I think it would be. Are you familiar with what a maker fair is?
I have no clue, but you should explain it away.
So a maker fair is basically where people can show off stuff they make. Whether it be like woodworking, robotics, 3D printing, stuff like that. And it's just a place for people to show off their cool stuff they make and just people getting together being passionate about what they love. That kind of stuff really like tugs at my heartstrings, you know?
Yeah.
I had a friend who passed away a couple years ago, and he taught me basically everything I know about like 3D printing, electronics, repair, and stuff like that. And him and I have always talked about like it would be cool to run like a maker fair or like have a maker space, which is a dedicated place where people could come together and run, make stuff and even host classes and seminars. So
Mhm.
it's been a dream of mine for a while, and it's something that I actually very actively have been researching on how to run because I think that would be an incredible resource to have for people.
That was an exceedingly thoughtful answer. I thought you'd say something like, I don't know, like a dog show or something.
I've actually thought about this quite a bit of like what would be like my magnum opus, what I would be remembered for type event, and it would be a bangin' maker fair.
Yeah, that sounds really incredible. All right. Well, thank you for coming along to the show. Are there any things you like to shout out before we end this?
Yeah, support your local game store. They are the lifeblood of a lot of communities, and I definitely think it still goes, unsaid a lot, but support your local game store. And if you can help out to make events run smoother, I definitely think you should. Get involved in your communities and just make the games you love better.
All right, I think that's a great note to end it off. So we'll go